Okay, so welcome everyone. I hope you're well. I hope you can see my slides. Let me know if you can't, but I'm hoping you can see my slides. And as I mentioned, this is we can, that's good, it's a good start. As I mentioned, this is a conversation, a webinar around how we can engage men in conversations around gender equality. And it's hosted by We Are the City. My name is Elliott Rae, and we've got an hour. So everyone, if you'd like to introduce yourself in the chat function, let people know who you are, where you work, and what you're trying to consider, what you're doing in your organization, and what you want out of today as well. So I can already see we've got Ritu in there. Hey Ritu, University of London, how are you doing? We've got Graham, all the way from Scotland, a retired police officer. Hey Ritu. So introduce yourselves in the chat. Let's make this interactive. Let us know who you are, where you work, and what you're doing. Hey Teresa, hey Lorraine. So let's introduce myself. That'd be a good start, wouldn't it? Who am I? Okay. So professionally, I run Music Football Fatherhood, which is a parenting and lifestyle platform for men, all about open conversations around being a dad. So we've got one of the most popular blogs in the UK for fathers. We have a podcast. We do events. Our next event is on Wednesday, actually, around masculinity. And we try and provide a space, really, just for fathers to explore what it is for them to be a dad. And we touch on topics ranging from expecting dads to new dads to working dads, topics and issues around race, around bullying, around education, and really try and just have those conversations that you're probably not going to get other places from like-minded people. We were called the dad's version of Mumsnet by the BBC, which was very nice. So alongside that, I'm also really involved in fathers in the workplace and really champion the supporting of fathers in the workplace, how organizations can do that, why they should do that, the benefits to doing that as well. And as part of that work, I was in Parliament early this year, helping the University of Birmingham's Equal Parenting Project to launch their Fathers in the Workplace Toolkit, alongside some great companies like Vodafone and Aviva. And I was also part of the Equal Lives report, which was done by Business in the Community. So this report really, for me, was groundbreaking. It really looked at how we can get a move towards equality in the home, but also in the work, and really explored attitudes and policies and what's really going on in the workplace. And I'm going to be talking about Equal Lives later on. I was lucky enough to be part of the campaign, in their videos, and speaking at their launch event as well. As part of that, I run Engage in Dads sessions. So I go to organizations and talk to them and help them to hear the voices of the men and fathers in their workplace, and really explore how they can better support working fathers. And lucky enough, out of all that work, I was very lucky to be recognized by United Nations and UN Women UK. And last year, I was the recipient of the UK He for She Changemaker Award in 2019. I've also done and held professional senior roles in government around diversity and inclusion. So as a practitioner, profession, I'm a diversity and inclusion professional. I have run Project Race in DEFRA, which was a large-scale culture change program spanning over 20,000 people across the department and also the agricultural sector as a whole. And most recently in the HM Treasury as their head of diversity and inclusion delivery. I also write quite a lot for MFF, but also for other publications, and I've written a few times for The Independent. The last article was actually retweeted and shared by The Rock, which was a big surprise to me. Wasn't expecting that. So that's me professionally. I dedicate my time and my energy to equality, really passionate about gender, around fatherhood, parenting, and race. And that's where I like to spend my time and energy in really making a change in the world. It's my passion. It's what I what I love doing. It doesn't feel like work to me. And I really feel like I can make some change in this area. And personally, I'm a husband. My wife's nanny is downstairs with my daughter, and we have one daughter. She is 5 years old, and we also have a dog, a new puppy called Jessie, who's the newest member of the Rae family. So for me, the reason I really got into working with organizations and looking at gender equality and fatherhood in the workplace was becoming a dad. For me, that was a life-changing moment, as it is for most parents, and that really, really opened my eyes to some of the roles that we are encouraged to have, to some of the expectations, and to what the workplace and wider society and media does to shape those roles and those expectations. So as I said, Ellie is 5 years old, and it's been such a journey for us as parents. It's been such a journey. The early pregnancy was actually pretty plain sailing. To be fair, it was all pretty easy, which is great. But for us, the birth was very, very difficult. And when my daughter was born, she had an infection, and it was quite serious. It's called Group B strep, and it was quite a serious infection. So after the long labour, which was up and down with lots of scares and about juice being used and all that sort of stuff, she came out and she wasn't breathing very well, and she was quite sick. So I had to resuscitate her and take her to intensive care. And we were in the hospital for 2 weeks, and it was up and down, and we weren't quite sure, if it was going to be okay. This is quite a serious infection. 1 in 10 babies die. Another 1 in 10 babies have a serious life-changing disability. So for us, it was a very kind of up and down period, those 2 weeks, and it kind of ended with an MRI scan because she got a bump in the back of her head, and the doctor was really, really worried. So we were kind of rushed into an emergency MRI scan. Thank God, as you can see, she's a very energetic five-year-old now. But what that happened after that was, I had a few days off work, and then I was back into work. So pretty much all of my 2 weeks paternity was spent in the hospital, and a few days back at home, and then kind of back into work. And going back into work after that traumatic experience, and my wife was experiencing a lot of postnatal anxiety, going back into the workplace was really a shock to the system, because there was times when I was so tired, when we clearly hadn't kind of dealt with what had happened. We hadn't come to terms with it. We didn't have any professional help at that time, and going into work and the expectations to kind of just pick up the job again, do the job. The expectations and the standards, there wasn't any allowance for those to slip. And for me, that was a real moment of like, wow, I'm not sure this is good. There were times when I was an active dad at home. I was doing the nighttime feeds and taking over when I got home from work, but also going to work and then feeling very tired. And I remember there was one time, for people that live in London, you might know the Victoria line. There was one time where I got on the train from Victoria, and we lived in Walthamstow, which is right at the end of the line. I got on the train, I was so tired after work, and I slumped down on the seat and just fell asleep. And then I felt like we got to the end of the line. We got to the end of the line, and I just couldn't get up from my seat. I just couldn't get up. And so I waited until the doors closed again and went back the other way. And it was just, I was just so tired from everything. It was very hard to function. And also being at work and feeling that tiredness, and sometimes in meetings, not feeling like you can contribute properly and you can really, really perform like how you want to. But what happened is I was actually quite lucky. I was working in a place that allowed me to work flexibly. So this meant that I could change my hours, and I did a lot. So here's a example of some of the kind of different flexible working hours that are available to people. I exercised a few of those within the first 18 months, I would say, you know, I did compressed hours where I didn't work on Fridays, which is great. So I worked long days from Monday to Thursday, but I didn't work on Fridays. And I worked from home on some days. I worked flexibly, where I would kind of start early and leave early. And I really just was able to change my hours a lot. And what that meant is that I could actually play both roles. I could be active at home, but I was also able to be my best self at work too. That was fresh when I was going to work. My lifestyle allowed for it. And what that meant in the long term, and what that means is now, is that, you know, I can work flexibly. I can do the school pickups, and that's allowed my wife to also do a similar role to me too. So, you know, we pretty much share the childcare, but she also has a senior job too. She's a senior manager as well. And I think for me, this is the main reason why I'm so passionate about supporting fathers in the workplace and gender equality, because I found that I've experienced both sides of it. I've experienced the overwhelm, the feeling of being stuck, that difficulty of trying to manage everything. I know how that feels, and talking to people in the music football fatherhood community, I know how that feels for people who aren't lucky enough to have flexible jobs. But I've also experienced where it's good, and I've seen the benefits of that to myself, to my child, and to my wife, and to my family as a whole. And that's what really drives me, and that's why I'm really passionate about this work. And what we know is that what can normally happen when that first child is born into a family is when the gender pay gap really gets serious. So we'll know before that there is still a gap. But when that first child is born into a family, that's when we really see difference, because normally the man would continue working, maybe hasn't got flexibility in his job, he's not able to help out so much with childcare, and the woman takes the brunt of that. The woman will normally be the one that's maybe the stay-at-home parent, or has to reduce her hours, or go into a job that's not as stressful and demanding on time, or just on mind space as well. And this is a really important point. So I think when we're thinking about why is it that we need to engage men in gender equality, there's lots of different reasons. For example, from a business perspective, retention of talent. We know that talented people who have caring responsibilities are you know, they see the monetary rewards as sometimes equal to their flexibility. So the good organizations that are retaining their talent now, places like Aviva, for example, engaging men in this conversation is really important. But of course, to address the challenges around the gender pay gap, we need to be able to look at what's happening when that first child is born into family. And there's been some good examples recently. So you may have seen in the BBC Zurich, they did a test for a year from February 2019 to March 2020, this year, just right before lockdown, conveniently. They advertised all their roles as flexible. So they added 6 words to all of their job descriptions: part-time, flexible hours, job share, 6 words. And they also used gender neutral language. What they were finding before they did that is they had feedback internally that it was harder for women in their organization to move up to senior roles. People weren't applying for some of their jobs because they weren't flexible. So they took the bold step to doing this. And what they found as a result was quite good, and something I think we should definitely reflect on. So as a result of doing this, they found that there was a 20% increase in women applying for senior roles. And there was a 33% increase in women successful in applying for senior roles. But interestingly, over and above that, they found that for all of their job vacancies, they had double the applications from both women and men. And I think those outcomes are really fantastic and really prove that just by making jobs flexible, which of course in the context of COVID has happened, and we'll talk about that later, but making those jobs flexible and accommodating for people's caring responsibilities, and if they're parents, their childcare responsibilities, accommodating for those really means you're going to attract a wider pool of talent, and you're going to get better people out of that. You're going to get happier people that stay in the organization, really champion the organization as well. And this is great for women in terms of representation at senior roles and culture, but also for men. And it shows that, as the research suggests, that actually men are starting to value that flexibility just as much as women too. And we can see that by that last statistic, double the applications from women and men for all the roles. And I think, for Zurich, it's fantastic because now for people who are maybe inside the organization, they will see great role models at senior management levels working flexibly, and that will mean that the culture, that's one of the main things that you can really do to move a culture to a place where it's not only acceptable, but it's celebrated when you have people working flexibly and not ashamed of mixing or they're not hiding the fact that they are a parent or a carer at work. And for men to be able to do that, to be proud of their caring responsibilities at work and actually be okay to get off their desk at 3 p.m. and go and do the school run, I think that's a really, really impressive and important place to be. So let's think about the Zurich example and the wider context around that, because that is a really good example, but we know that there are challenges. I spoke about the Equal Lives report that was done in 2018, really comprehensive report, and that report really looked at what is going on with attitudes, with policies, with views, and what are the barriers to us achieving that equality. Because we know that for us to achieve gender equality in the workplace, we need to move towards equality in the home. Now, those two things are not exclusive from each other. They are interlinked intrinsically. They are related. I want to run through a few things that came out of that report. Really interesting. So one quote I want to take out was from a father. It said, "When the twins were born, there was lots of support around my wife. I was working very hard. It was full on at home, and I was probably depressed when I look back, but nobody would have even asked if I was all right." And twice more men than women with caring responsibilities believe that organization expects them to put work above family commitment. So we can see, from that feedback from that dad there and his twins, that societally we don't necessarily consider always the challenges and the changes that will go into a man's life when he becomes a dad. And a lot of men have reflected that in their workplace. They feel like their workplace expects them to put their work above their caring responsibilities. And also, 55% of men feel the demands of their own job has adversely affected their partner's career. And that's a lot less than what women would say. But we know that the tide is changing. We know that there are more men that do want to get involved in caring responsibilities. 83% of men with caring responsibilities believe that organizations should provide considerable support for employees who look after children or dependent adults. And 1 in 6 men report that they have changed their role within the current organization or moved to a different organization to help balance work and caring responsibilities. And interestingly, this report found that 2 in 3 men said they would be encouraged to use family-friendly policies if they were confident it would not impact their career. And I think this is really interesting. We know that there are these challenges and these stereotypes societally in the workplace what we're seeing is that there is a will for more men, for more dads, more carers, male carers, to take on more of those care responsibilities. But it's that challenge in terms of how will that impact my career? How will I be seen by my colleagues? Is it acceptable, culturally acceptable in my organization to do that? So I think when we're talking about engaging men in gender equality conversations, it's really important to get to the root. Why is it that we're getting this feedback? Why is it that a lot of men and women feel this way in regards to their gender roles? I think ultimately we can't ignore the fact that masculinity and femininity puts us in boxes, and no one exists solely in one box, either biologically or psychologically. And this is really important because from a young age, a lot of boys are taught to be a certain way. We've all heard the phrase, boys don't cry. Boys are told that they're not carers, that they have to be warriors, that they can't be emotional, they have to be emotionless, they have to be strong. And this starts from a very, very young age. And that is seeped into us, both men, boys and girls, from I would say from as soon as they can, interact with the world. And you may have seen a really interesting video I was taking at school. So a teacher with their school children, I think maybe they were in reception or year one, they were talking to their class about a firefighter. And they described this firefighter. This firefighter would go into burning buildings and was really good with the equipment and really strong and would put fires out and they would save people. They were great. And all the kids were like, wow, this firefighter sounds amazing. And so the teacher asked the children to draw the firefighter. And the children were drawing, and out of the 30 children, I think it was 27, don't quote me, 26 or 27, out of the 30 children, all drew men. They had a fireman. They would draw a fireman. And after the teacher walked around the class and had a look at all the pictures, and then went to say, okay, we've got a surprise. We're going to bring in that firefighter. And in walked a young lady. And the children couldn't believe it. They couldn't believe that a woman was the person that their teacher was talking about. And it just shows how, from an early age, we are conditioned to believe men and women are certain ways based on what masculine is and what feminine is. And what I always talk about is that ultimately we don't exist just in one box. Some men will be alpha males, and when we're talking about the workplace, they will want to work all the hours, and that's what's natural to them, and maybe their partner likes that too, and that works for some people. The traditional setup works for some people. We shouldn't look down on people that do that. That is perfectly okay for some people where it works in their families. But for other people, that may not be true. That man, just because he is a man, doesn't necessarily mean he is going to be the alpha male. He may have traits that we look at as feminine, like caring, like empathy. Those sort of things that he may actually embody more than his partner. And I think in those instances, in those circumstances, what we want to work towards is being able to have those options for people. And ultimately, when we're talking about things like shared parental leave and flexible working and job shares and all that for men, that we want men to have the options, because ultimately, as it says, none of us exist solely in one box, biologically and psychologically. And what we find is that the pressure to be masculine on men is very heavy and can take its toll. And there's some great research that Calm, Campaign Against Living Miserably, have done in 2016. They did a really good piece of research to look at, what is that pressure? Why are men, for example, committing suicide at really high rates? Why do men not feel like they can talk about things when they're going through depression? And why is it that we feel like we are contained in this box? So I think ultimately we need to think about masculinity, and when we're engaging men in these conversations, really getting down to the root causes of why we are here is essential. And I'll talk about the definition of patriarchy. Patriarchy is a social system in which men hold primary power and predominate in roles of political leadership, moral authority, social privilege, and control of property. And essentially, engaging men in these conversations about gender equality, we have to lead with the lines that dismantling patriarchy and dismantling and changing gender expectations is actually to the benefit of men too. And in some ways you could think it's sad that we have to do this. Why doesn't everyone just get it? And why doesn't everyone care? Of course, some men will care about gender equality, and they will want more women to rise up into senior positions just because that's who they are. But unfortunately for a lot of other men and a lot of other people, full stop, when it comes to change and inclusion and these kind of things, we have to explain to people what's in it for them. And there is a lot of benefits to dismantling patriarchy and gender expectations for men. Sometimes we just don't know what they are. So I'm going to spend some time talking about what are the benefits of dismantling patriarchy and gender expectations for men. There's loads. So the first one, we're talking about parenting, ongoing fatherhood involvement. Fathers who take 2 or more weeks off after their child is born are more involved in their child's care 9 months later. Paid paternity leave can help foster better father-child relationships. And I was recently on a panel event last week for International Men's Day, and there was some other dads on the panel, and there was some really touching stories about this. One dad who was very senior in the organization, senior manager, very good job, demanding job, earns a lot of money. And he said that his son said to his partner, "Where does daddy live?" Now his home is in the family home. He lives there. Him and his partner are together. But because he's always working, he's always out. And his son genuinely didn't think he lived in the house. And he said it was the most shameful and embarrassing thing anyone's ever said to him or about him. And there was another dad on the panel as well, who only now in lockdown has really felt like his kids have got to know him and he's got to know his children. Because during the working week, he was working so much. And so that relationship between the dad and the children can be damaged. And I think when we're looking at those gender expectations and how we dismantle those expectations and patriarchy, it leads to more fatherhood involvement. And children's outcomes. Father absence tends to correlate with poorer children's outcomes, including lower education attainment, poorer health, greater emotional and behavioral problems, with effects lasting well into adulthood. And this is research from the Children's Encyclopedia. We know that when the dad is active in the child's life, it helps with emotions, with behaviors, with education, with well-being. So dismantling patriarchy again and gender expectations is beneficial to that man, because his role in his children's life will be important to him. And then relationships. I'm sure some of you will laugh at this, but evidence suggests that the greater the father's contribution to housework and childcare, the more satisfied both parents are, and the more stable their relationship. Now, if my wife was here, I'm sure she'd agree. But yeah, for relationships, for healthy relationships, we know that both parents chipping in is good. It's good for everyone, and who doesn't want a healthy relationship? But also, you could argue the big one. We spoke about the CALM research. The suicide rate for men in England and Wales in 2019 was the highest for 2 decades, official figures show. The ONS said that men accounted for about 3/4 of suicide deaths registered in 2019. That's 4,303 compared to 1,388 women. The patriarchy in the systems and the gender expectations are putting a lot of pressure on men, and some men don't know how to escape that. They don't know how to see out of that. I spoke about that statistic around, disproportionately men do not talk about things when they are depressed. They don't tell anyone, because to tell someone is weak. It is not what a man is supposed to feel. Men are supposed to be strong. Men are supposed to be the leader, and to show vulnerability is to be weak. And that is one of the core reasons why we get to this stage, and people feel like they have to take their own life. And ultimately, patriarchy and the systems around and those expectations on men is meaning that they can't open up, they can't talk, and also they put that unnecessary pressure on themselves to be the breadwinner, to really be that strong person and not have any downs. And as we know, as we get into adulthood, we know everyone has ups and downs. No one is immune to ups and downs. Absolutely everyone in the whole world has those. And so we need to allow men to go through those and talk about those as well. And that will help massively. And as we dismantle patriarchy in those systems, we'll be able to do that. The current social constructs are killing us, literally. We need a readjustment, and men and women need to work on this equally. Gender equality is not something that only women can do. If no men get involved, we won't get very far. We need men and women to really look at what is happening, to look at the benefits of us working to dismantle these social constructs, and equally we can make a change for the benefit of everybody. And I think we're in a real opportunity now. COVID-19 is something that has changed all of our lives. I would never thought I would spend so much time at home this year. At the moment, my daughter's downstairs because there's a positive case in her school. So I feel like I'm in lockdown 1 again. Crazy. But what we've seen is that, a lot of people have been working from home since March. And we've seen a real shift in how we work. And in some ways, a lot of the things that I and others have been talking about and championing has been accelerated over this period. And a lot of organizations that were maybe making excuses or didn't know how to implement certain things, because of necessity, they've had to. We've seen that things can be done from home. And actually, a lot of the parents I speak to, at least, are a lot happier. Me, I don't have to run around in Euston Station for the train. I'm not worrying about getting fined £1 per minute for my daughter's nursery when she was in nursery for being late. I feel like I'm getting more sleep. My well-being, I haven't worn a shirt for 6 months. I hate ironing, so that's great too. So lots of benefits, loads of benefits. But in May, the ONS found that the first lockdown had led to a 58% increase in childcare undertaken by men, whose working hours dropped by 1 hour and 37 minutes per day. While women still did more childcare, the gender care gap narrowed. And in 2015, the ONS found that men were spending 39% of the time that women spent on childcare, compared to 64% during lockdown. So now we're in it's an opportunity at the moment. How do we learn the lessons from what's happened this year? So, next year, hopefully, when things go back to some sort of normality, how do we learn the lessons from this? It's important. We can't just let this moment pass. We have to make sure that we evaluate what's going on here and we design a future that really capitalizes on the wins. There's been a lot of losses this year, but the wins, what is it that's been good? And how do we build that into the way we work in the future? So I want to talk about some practical tips for engaging men in conversations about gender equality. There's a few. So involving men in design of events and policies is important. I founded and chaired a young families network. a few years ago, and really made sure that on the executive team we had a mixture of men and a mixture of women. And I think that's important because we get the input of men and women, but also it shows our members and the wider organization and people that are yet to be members that this is something for both men and women too. And that goes into my next point about encouraging men onto your network executive committee. So if you can, maybe having a target to make sure X% of your executive committee members are going to be men. I think when you're doing events and communications, bringing in senior male champions is really important. Hopefully your organization will have a senior champion around caring and around parenting. That is important, obviously, because they are senior and they have influence, but also bringing in junior male staff is important too. I think, sometimes we forget that junior staff have a lot of influence. They will potentially connect with and talk to more people on the ground than a senior manager would. So making sure you're involved in junior male staff as well. I think intersectionality is important when engaging men in these conversations. So consider race, age, disability, sexual orientation, and other characteristics. There will be specific things that relate to different people. Me as a Black man, I will have different challenges to other people. Me as a Black father, I'll have different challenges, and a gay dad, a disabled dad will also have different challenges too. So I think when we're talking about representation on events and panels and speakers and whatnot, but also considering policies and messages to make sure that we are including the range of men and looking at intersectionality. I think getting men on panels, making sure the men in your organization are speaking up, find those male champions, senior, junior, and get them to talk. Get them to tell their stories as honest and vulnerable as possible. That is the way that we move the culture forward. When you've got people who are open to coming and sharing their stories, other people will feel like they can too. Bringing guest speakers who men can relate to. We're talking about intersectionality. I think the case is us as human beings, when we see people who we can relate to in some ways, we maybe hear them a little bit more. We'll give them a bit more of a chance. And so, me being careful, who is it that you can bring in that can really relate to your audience? And lastly, thinking about how to work differently after lockdown. A lot of men, male carers, dads, carers will have had an experience over the last few months. And from what I've heard, it's been a very positive experience in terms of work-life balance. So, really engaging them in those conversations about what does the future look like. And now is a really great time to do that. And lastly, I think be bold and be brave. Today, when I spoke about masculinity, when you speak about patriarchy, when you're sharing those emotive stories, you have to be brave to do that and be bold to do that. We can talk on a surface level about solutions and data. Of course, that's all good. But don't be scared also to touch on some of the more difficult topics and some of the root causes as to why we have those gender expectations and what they are doing to us. Don't be scared. Don't be scared to don't shy away from those things. It's important to engage people. And I think it's effective in engaging people too. People want to hear those things. So don't be scared of that. So as I mentioned, I do a lot of work with engaging men and engaging dads, and spend a lot of my time doing what we call engaging dads workshops through Music Football Fatherhood. And these workshops are workshops where we go into organizations, and men and women are welcome, line managers, everyone's welcome. And we talk in a really interactive workshop about how fatherhood has changed from the 70s, when dads weren't even in the labor ward, when they just continued to work and then some nice clean baby came home a week later, to how that's changed now. So we talk a lot about that. There's some quizzes and there's a lot of interaction pieces in there. We get people to share about their family life and how they have shaped their work life to suit their family. If they have, we get people to share about that, and people don't normally talk about that at work, so that's really interesting. And then we run through kind of why we need to support working fathers, the benefits of doing that, and importantly, how we do that through culture, through line management, and through policies. And we end with a fatherhood panel where we get dads up on the stage, and we ask them some questions about the things that we've discussed and what they would like to see done differently. I'd like to share a couple of videos from people who have experienced those workshops. So hopefully I play this and you can hear. Let me know.
Cool. Hi, I'm Nick from MHCLG. I've just been on the Engaging Dad workshop, which I really enjoyed. I found it really helpful to have a chance to talk with others about experiences of shared parental leave, of being a dad and considering how you balance that with your work, and just to think about what more we can do about this. And it was also good to hear about music, football, fatherhood, and know there's like platforms, not just in civil service, but beyond, that we can do this at.
So that was Nick from MHCLG, and I'm going to play this video as well from Chelsea from Carnival.
Hello, I'm Chelsea. I work here at Carnival. I also work with Athena. We've had Elliott here today who's led some really engaging conversation. We've had dads talking about feeling guilty, which I was never aware. We talk a lot about women feeling guilty, so that was a huge surprise to me. Lots of interesting statistics, really great conversation. I really hope it's going to make a difference here.
And those workshops, they really are about opening up that conversation and hearing from other dads. So where Chelsea was saying, she didn't know about the dad guilt, because a lot of men don't talk about the dad guilt at work. So creating that space where we can try to understand more about people's experiences. A lot of the time we can see the world through our own lens, but hearing from other people is really powerful. And then staff networks and HR departments can start to think about what is it that they can do to benefit the business, and to benefit their employees as well. So following on from Engaging Dads workshops, I also wanted to talk to you about something that I am very, very excited about. As I said, I run Music, Football, Fatherhood, the parenting and lifestyle platform for men. And the contributors from our team, we have a team of 20 contributors, and we have a social media manager and an editor. And some of our contributors and some other dads, we've come together to put a book together called Dad, Untold Stories from the Frontline of Fatherhood. And this book it's a deeply moving collection of stories from different dads talking about their fatherhood experiences from an honest and vulnerable place. The men we have are writing things down on paper for us that they have never said out loud. And when we're talking about masculinity and what it means to be a man, and move into a place where we can be more open and we can share and we can acknowledge our ups and downs, I genuinely feel like this book is going to have a massive impact on the conversation around fatherhood and mental health and masculinity and gender equality. There's stories in there that will cover things like work-life balance and new dads being bullied at work and workplace culture, and shared parental leave and stay-at-home dads, to identity, to widowhood, to gay fatherhood and surrogacy, to being a black dad, to being a stepdad. All those different stories, but ultimately the string that connects them is that these are open conversations, and this is about men talking about their fatherhood experiences, and we haven't heard a lot of these stories before. And I want to show you play you a video that we have prepared for the crowdfunder that we have just launched last week.
Who does a dad turn to when the love of their life and mother of their children dies during childbirth? How does postnatal depression affect men? How does it feel for a gay dad to go through the surrogacy process? What are the challenges of being a black dad and raising a mixed-race child? What is the experience of a dad on shared parental leave? Or a stay-at-home dad going against traditional gender stereotypes? We at Music, Football, Fatherhood are telling their stories, and stories of other dads in our new book, Dad, untold stories from the front line of fatherhood. Dad is a deeply moving collection of stories that represent the diversity of modern fatherhood and seeks to start a conversation that challenges the traditions associated with masculinity. We know that Dad is a groundbreaking and essential book. We know the world needs it. This book is an essential and important step in moving the conversation about fatherhood, masculinity, mental health and gender equality forward. We need your help to make this book a reality. To support us, please donate to our crowdfunder and share with your friends, family and community. We really appreciate your support. Be a part of the moment to create more open conversations around fatherhood. We are Dad.
So as I mentioned, we have sound video is really powerful. I watch it every time and it just, yeah, it gets me every time. But it really sums up what we're trying to achieve in the book. And we have some partners that we're working with. Some are the best football club in London, QPR, my team, of course, are on board as a partner. We have, Carers UK, Action for Children, Working Dads, Portsmouth Football Club, BT's Gender Equality Network. So it's a mixture of networks in organizations and also, companies from a corporate perspective as well. So we're looking for more partners. We're looking for more people to come on board. You don't have to give us money. You can give us money if you have money, but you don't have to become a partner. All you need to do is, promote our crowdfunder, help us to get the messages out there around our book. We can do explore some joint events and stuff like that. And in exchange, we will credit you in the book, and we've got a page for all of our partners as well. So it's something that you can use in your organization as a partner. The crowdfund is going really, really well. I've been so overwhelmed by the generosity and the amount we have raised, but we need your help. I want to make this a professional product. It's going to be in Waterstones, on the Waterstones website. It's going to be hardback, but we really need help to make sure that it's the best product that it can be, and these stories deserve that, and that we can do all we can to make sure it gets out there and all the people that need to see the book can see the book. So the crowdfunder is crowdfunder.co.uk/we are Dad. So in summary, we do have some time for questions. We've got 10 minutes. So number one, I hope you have some ideas around how you can engage men through your events and through your networks. We spoke a lot around those things around champions, around masculinity, around intersectionality, around talking about the benefits of dismantling patriarchy and gender expectations for men, and tips for how you can do that. And ultimately the fact that men are, and a lot more dads especially now, are very interested and want to work differently. COVID has been a game changer, and now is a really important time to lean in on this. Now, we're probably not going to get this opportunity again, so I'd really compel you to seize this moment as much as you can. The second thing is our Engaging Dads workshops, or I also do talks like this around fatherhood and masculinity and gender equality. So if you would like, of course, I can come down to your company, just get in contact with me. I'm sure this will go out with some contact details, but my email address is hello@musicfootballfatherhood.com, or just look for me, Elliott Rae, on LinkedIn. And the third thing around our book, this has been really powerful. It's this special project. So if you would like to, then become a partner in our book, and if you'd like to too, donate to our crowdfund as well. But yeah, I really hope you found this useful. There is, before I go into the questions, there is another event on the 24th, which is tomorrow. Yep. That We Are the City are doing, and it's around workplace bullying, why it happens, and how you can protect yourself. So sign up on their website. So We Are virtual event, really good, with Annette Shaw. So please do sign up for that. I want to make sure I get that in, and don't forget. So let's go to questions. I'm going to open the floor now, and if anyone would like to come into the conversation. So we've got, just use the hand up function. If you know how to put your hand up, I think it's by the participants, and then we can come to you. So Nelly, would you like to come in with a comment or question? Hey Nelly, are you there?
Hi, good. Sorry, the connection was getting poorly. My question was more about not how do you counteract what society teaches your children, even if it's not your own doing. So I've got a boy, and I consider myself to be quite a strong female, and I'm a single parent. And my son started school, and he's come back with things like boys are stronger, big boy don't cry. And I always tell him that's not true. You can become a big boy, but you can still cry and show your emotion. And girls are strong, you know. And I always to try show him with example, but I don't really know how you can counterbalance what other people are teaching their children and what is hearing outside of home.
Yeah, it's a good question. Thanks, Nelly. And I think what you're doing is right. And I think, unfortunately, you know, I see from my daughter, those influences from school and, you know, things out of our control are very strong. And so what I will have to do, and what we do, is try and work extra hard to balance out those messages. So the things that you're talking about in terms of the messaging, just telling, you know, talking about it in terms of what he watches and what he reads and what he consumes, and making sure that is working towards what you want him to be. But also bring in other men. I know you said you're a single parent, but if there's a man that can come in and talk to him from a male perspective as well, you know, being able to bring in other people to help you as well is really powerful. But, you know, it's not easy at all. I'm going through the same thing myself, and I think us as parents, we've just got to work extra hard to really recognize the messages they're getting and make sure they're getting a balance of those messages. And I think as long as we can do that consistently, then we'll be okay.
Thank you.
Thanks, Nelly. Thanks so much. Okay, does anyone else want to come into the conversation? Do we have any more hands up? Can't see any more. Maybe I've stunned you all into silence, maybe. So yeah, we've got 5 more minutes left. So if anyone would like to come in, then feel free. Here we go. We have another person, Lily. Okay, so I'll click allow you to talk.
Hi, Elliott. Is that working now?
I can hear you now.
Great, thank you very much for your presentation. My question was about engaging men who maybe aren't fathers or aren't fathers yet. I know you talked in one of your points about engaging junior men, and I just wondered if you had any tips for engaging men in the conversation outside of fatherhood.
Yeah, so I do find that fatherhood is a kind of an immediate way, because obviously that is where their life changes. But I think there are younger men who may have caring responsibilities, or just want to work flexibly for other reasons too. And we're finding, especially like with millennials and younger people, is that they are valuing, and not just valuing, but expecting to work in certain ways. So they are expecting to be able to work from home. They're expecting flexibility. So I think if you can find people who you know who are younger, aren't parents, but like to have variation in their life, I don't know, they might have a hobby. They might enjoy whatever it is outside work they want to do. They work differently to the norm. I would really keep those people close and make sure those people are a core part of your strategy. They're in your network, they are sharing, they are talking. Because if we can amplify, you know, role models and do it in the right way, their voices can spread. And if you've got just 3 or 4 people, young men, aren't parents, but for whatever reason, whether it's caring or just lifestyle, they work differently, you know, making sure that their voices are heard and platforming them, making sure they are speaking, making sure they are visible, making sure they're feeding into materials, I think is a great start. And and can hopefully then encourage others. And then, you know, when they get older, them and other people around them will already be in that headspace already. I hope that helps. It's a tough one, but I hope that helps. Okay, so do we have anyone else? Last chance. 3, 2, 1, go in. Okay, so
Hey,
thanks everyone. Thanks so
sorry,
much.
Elliot, can you hear me? It's Chantal.
I can. Go on.
Just to let you know, there was 2 questions in the Q&A panel as well, that if you're all right to have a look at them, please.
Okay, sure. So I didn't see that. I'm new to the webinar stuff on Zoom anyway. Okay, so Alicia, hello Elliot. Thank you so much for this. It was really helpful. You mentioned briefly, however, as an organisation, how can we help men with caring responsibilities for their parents? I know, especially in some cultures, the son is expected to look after older parents. Yeah, this is a great point, and I think it's ultimately the same tools and techniques that I've spoke about in terms of the fathers. The same things around role models, around intersectionality, around bringing them into policy design, around platforming people, around being vocal and make sure those people are visible. I think you use the same techniques, but you just apply it to caring. You know, I was on a panel last week and there was a young man who is a new graduate, was caring for his mother for the last 5 years. And the conversation that we had around men, fatherhood and caring, you know, it all kind of evolved around the same thing. Ultimately, this is a young man that needs to work flexibly. He needs to be able to work differently. And where his organization is, he really benefited and really liked the fact that he could leave early before lockdown, he could work flexibly, and that was good. And they brought him into the conversation and made sure he was talking. So I think it's the same kind of messages, really making sure your people and your organization knows that there are young men, young males with caring responsibilities, and ultimately that you have a responsibility to cater to them. So I would say, yeah, same kind of themes. I don't think there's obviously differences in your messaging and your approach, but I would stick to the same kind of techniques. Okay, so another question. What do you think about how some Scandinavian countries have approached things like shared parental leave and extended paternity leave? Do we need to mandate it? Old concept, unlikely to happen, to get culture shift needed? How much do you think is still around the societal notion of the provider? Yeah, so, you know, countries like Sweden, Norway have done amazing, and they have great policies. But I think interestingly, you know, what you're saying around culture is the key here. So I want to talk about Aviva, and Aviva have done some really good work to introduce equal paternity leave for mums and dads. So I think it's 9 months, 6 months and 9 months paid. Doesn't matter who you are, you could be the dad or the mum. And before they introduced that policy, what they did a lot of culture change work. I think it was 18 months. They were doing workshops, they were doing consultations, they were going around talking to their staff, consulting their staff, and making sure people knew why they're looking to introduce this new policy and what they're trying to achieve from it. And basically shaping the culture before the policy was implemented. And I think that was really important and really clever, because sometimes if we just introduce a policy, but no one knows that it's safe to use, or no one knows that it's got the backing of senior leaders, or no one knows why we're doing it, what we're trying to achieve, you know, the take up can be quite low, and we've seen that with shared parental leave. But if in your organization you are doing more work to build the culture, which ultimately is the decision, that's the most important thing. You know, if the policy is there for dad to work flexibly, it depends on whether the culture says that is allowed to do. So for example, yeah, there's been times when I've had to leave meetings with my permanent secretary at 3 o'clock to do the school run. And the policy is there, but actually, if I didn't feel like that was a safe thing to do, if I didn't feel like that wasn't going to affect my career, I wouldn't have done it. So I think, you know, we can't always shape culture outside of our immediate influence outside of our organizations. That's hard to do. You can do it, of course. We tried to do it through MFF, but what you can ultimately control is the culture in your organization. So I would say, yes, the Scandinavian countries have done great stuff, and obviously we want to aim to be there. But before we go to mandate policies and whatnot, I think it's just the culture change work that has to be done with employees and staff members first. And then in time, we can get to the point where we can potentially mandate stuff, but people will want it anyway, hopefully. So I hope that's answered your question. And yeah, thank you everyone. It's been really good. It's been a great session. I've enjoyed it. I hope you have too. And yeah, I hope you have a good day. As I said, please get in contact with me if there's anything you want to discuss further. And again, thank you to We Are the City. Big thank you to Vanessa and the team as well. So thanks everyone. Thank you so much.
Brilliant.